everyone. I'm Cindy Vosberg, Crescent City Del Norte Chamber of Commerce Director. Oh, there's the recording. Let me start over. Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Vosberg, Crescent City Del Norte Chamber of Commerce Director. Thank you for being here with us. The Chamber of Commerce is the voice of business. And I like to think of us as being part of your staff, but not on your payroll. Anything that we can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask. Tonight's meeting will end right around 5:55 and will be followed by our community update. You're welcome to sign back in for that meeting. We've posted the link into the chat window in case you need it. Also, if you have any questions for our speakers, feel free to type those into the chat window, or you can raise your hands and we'll be asking you live. We'll unmute you and ask you live what you have to say. Tonight, we have the honor of having Senator Mike McGuire here with us. Senator McGuire is in his second term as a state senator for the North Coast. He represents the 2nd District, stretching from the Oregon border to the Golden Gate Bridge. His district includes Del Norte, Trinity, Humboldt, Lake, Mendocino, Sonoma, and Marin counties. The senator currently serves as the Senate's Assistant Majority Leader and is chair of the Senate Governance and Finance Committee. He also sits on the Budget, Transportation, Housing, Energy, and Education committees. One of the things I have found to be apparent since Senator McGuire won his seat is he cares about us here in Del Norte County. He spends time here, reaches out to us, and is always available. We may be the most northern county he serves and probably the smallest, but we are not forgotten. I also want to recognize Senator McGuire's talented staff, a top-notch team that surely are a great asset to him. With that, let's turn this meeting over to Senator Mike McGuire.
Well, good evening, everyone. Cindy, thank you so much for allowing me to be with you today. And I got to tell you, Cindy, we are so appreciative of you. Let's just be candid. It's been an incredibly challenging 18 months. And through it all, Ms. Vosberg and the Chamber of Commerce has stood strong for our business community, and we owe you a debt of gratitude. If we could have a round of applause to Ms. Vosberg and the Chamber, please, and say thank you so much. And thank you all for being with us here today. We're thankful to each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be able to attend this very specific meeting tailored to Del Norte's business community. These past 18 months for business leaders here at home in Del Norte County and across the state, these past 18 months for business leaders and the dedicated workforce who serve this county every day have been the most challenging on record. Challenging economically, challenging personally. So many have struggled to keep their doors open, and many others have been sick or have had a family member who have been impacted by this pandemic. And especially over these past 90 days, Del Norte has been hit incredibly hard due to the highly contagious Delta variant and relatively low vaccination rate. That said, we're seeing improvements. And the reason why we're seeing improvements, when times are tough, Del Norte County rallies. We're seeing an increase in folks getting vaccinated. We're seeing the masking order that was implemented by Dr. Stutz and the Board of Supervisors. It's making a significant difference in bringing down community spread. And we're seeing enhanced state services and programs and staffing now embedded in Del Norte County, which is expanded treatment, expanded testing, as well as the vaccination availability. Look, I know that folks are tired. We've been dealing with this for almost 2 years, and we need to stick together. Our only fight right now, is against this virus. This fight, it's not with each other. The single most important thing that we can do right now is to get vaccinated. And we are grateful for our panelists who are here today. Today, we have incredibly capable representatives from both Cal OSHA and the Department of Fair Housing for the state of California. They're going to be covering workplace safety rules, everything you need to know to be successful in your business during this pandemic. And we're going to hear about vaccinations and employees, how to protect your customers, how to protect your staff and your family's business in this era of a pandemic. But first, we are so appreciative that Melody Cannon-Cutts, as well as Del Norte County's own public health officer, Dr. Stutz, is here with us tonight. Ms. Cannon-Cutts and Dr. Stutz, representing Del Norte County Health and Human Services, they're going to be providing a community update for us on all issues of COVID. And we're just minutes away from taking your questions. There's 3 ways that you're going to be able to take questions, and that's the most to ask questions. And that's the most important part of tonight. We have several dozen pre-submitted questions. Thank you so much for submitting. We're going to be getting to those in just a moment. If you have a question right now, you can also submit your question into the chat right here on Zoom. We welcome them. And then we're also going to be taking live questions. Cindy will be moderating those live questions in just a few minutes. All right, let's get into it. We have a hard out at 5:55. So let's turn over to Melody Cannon-Cutts and Dr. Stutz for a quick COVID community update. Ms. Cannon-Cutts, it's great to see you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you so much, Senator. Good evening, everyone. I am pleased to report that the numbers of positive COVID-19 cases in Del Norte County are indeed trending downward. We are seeing significant improvement in counts of positive cases, in those that are hospitalized, and fatalities. To illustrate this improvement, Del Norte County began to experience a surge in new COVID-19 cases nearly 8 weeks ago. On July 26th, we had 55 active cases, up from 23 just 3 days prior. At that time, there were 0 hospitalizations. By August 23rd, the positive cases surged to 417, and 25 people were hospitalized. Del Norte has sustained 38 total fatalities as of today's date. 24 of those fatalities have occurred since August 13th. Today, we're down to 74 positive cases and 6 that are hospitalized. We can attribute this decline in positive cases to doing what we have learned to do since the pandemic began. Get vaccinated. We are now 48% fully vaccinated. Practice social distancing, hand washing, and wearing our masks. On August 26th, our health officer released a public health order to wear facial coverings in workplaces and public settings. For an update on the masking order, I'll pass to Dr. Aaron Stutz.
Good evening, Dr. Stutz.
Thanks, guys, for having me. So I wanted just to reiterate that the masking order was put into place because of those high numbers that we were seeing. And hard to say if it was the masking order or if it was everybody's collective efforts of getting the word out here, but the cases are on a steep decline, and that's really encouraging. So I just wanted to let everyone know that I do anticipate if rates continue this way, that we'll probably be able to rescind the masking order in a couple of weeks' time. And that would mean that although you're not required to wear a mask, I will probably be accompanying that with a suggestion to continue wearing it during this time, as we can see how easy it was to fall into this COVID trap. Although I don't think the masking mandate will be necessary in a couple of weeks' time, I'm still going to recommend that people wear those masks during large gatherings and when they're out in public. Just something to keep in mind. And I wanted to also talk briefly about the flu vaccine. We're heading into flu season here, and although we've been harping on the COVID vaccine and how important it is, the flu vaccine is important as well. We did not see a whole lot of flu last year, and I think that was a testament to how well the masking and stay-at-home orders and things that we were doing last year worked. We actually significantly reduced influenza rates in Del Norte, and to a level that nobody has ever seen since before we started collecting data on the subject, which I thought was really telling. But I just wanted to remind everyone that the influenza vaccine will be available here shortly, and please seek out and obtain the influenza vaccine as well as your COVID vaccine, because we don't really know what's going to happen with influenza this year. And that's all I got for you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stutz. So you heard it here first. We're going to be doing 2 for 1. You head on over and get 2 shots, right? It will be able to protect you both from the flu as well as COVID. Thank you so much, Dr. Stutz. Ms. Cannon-Cutts, it's great to see you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have some esteemed panelists who are with us today. First and foremost, we're going to welcome Eric Berg here. Eric Berg is going to be representing Cal OSHA. Mr. Berg is going to be talking about COVID workplace safety. He's going to have about 5 minutes. Then we're going to turn it over to Brandon Butler. But first and foremost, Mr. Burke, we welcome you. You have 5 minutes. I know you have some slides. Thank you for attending. We welcome you to Del Norte County. The floor is yours, and I'll give you a 30-second prompt.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Can you see my screen okay?
You're coming in loud and clear, and we see it. Thank you.
Okay, it's not. There we go. Yeah, my name is Eric Berg. I'm the Deputy Chief of Health for Cal OSHA, the State Occupational Safety and Health Program. I'll quickly go over a few things in the state regulation, which vary a little bit differently from the county regulation. So first on face coverings, on the state regulation, no face coverings required for employees in workplaces outdoors, regardless of vaccination status. So that's both for unvaccinated and vaccinated outdoors. Under the state rule, people don't need masks. And then indoors, employees who are not fully vaccinated must wear face coverings inside or when in vehicles. And the county, as Dr. Stutz was saying, has more protective requirements right now. When they lift those requirements, then the state requirements would apply, which is face coverings required indoors for unvaccinated people. And then for that to apply, employers have to document vaccination status. And then employers must provide face coverings to employees if they ask for them, even if they don't have to use them. And then employees have to be allowed to use face coverings if they want to, without fear of retaliation. And then due to the Delta variant, this is a recommendation, the last bullet point here. It's not a requirement that under the state, everyone is recommended to use masks indoors and in vehicles. And there's also the California Department of Public Health, called CDPH, requires everyone to wear masks indoors in certain circumstances, which I listed here. And I also have the link to the health department's website. So it's in public transit or in transit stations, in K through 12 schools and childcare, healthcare settings, correctional facilities, detention centers, homeless shelters, and emergency centers. So that regardless of vaccination status, masks have to be worn indoors in those certain things. And there's some exceptions to state face covering rules. When a person's alone, obviously, they're eating or drinking or wearing a respirator. It's a specific type of mask that provides much better protection. When an accommodation is required due to a health issue or a religious issue, or just because the job, you can't use a mask for doing the job, like say an actor that needs to put makeup on, obviously they can't wear a mask while that's getting done, or while they're acting. So certain jobs where you can't use a mask, there's an exception for that. And next is documenting employees' vaccination status. So that's helpful for knowing who needs to wear a mask indoors or not. So there's three ways an employer can do this. They can maintain a copy of the employee's vaccination record, either electronically or a physical copy. And employees can just review the vaccination card from the employee and just make a check mark on a list or something, but they don't have to keep it. Or lastly, they can just ask employees to self-attest if they are fully vaccinated, and then keep a record of that, but they don't have to have a record of the actual vaccination card. So there's different options there for determining who's vaccinated, sorry. And testing, employers have to provide testing to employees. For unvaccinated employees who have symptoms, unvaccinated employees after a close contact with a COVID-19 case. And a recommendation for Delta is make testing available to everyone with symptoms or after close contact with a case, regardless of vaccination status. And then also for employees who are fully vaccinated without symptoms, no testing is required after close contact and no quarantining is required after close contact, whereas the people who aren't vaccinated have to be tested and quarantined. And then for Delta, there's some recommendations that these even vaccinated people take some extra precautions after close contact, such as wearing a mask, maintaining physical distancing, avoiding crowds, poorly ventilated areas, and then get tested if possible. And then respirators, which I said is a different type of mask, provides much more protection. It seals to the face and is designed to filter out particles. So employers have to provide respirators to employees who are not vaccinated if they specifically request them. And then employers cannot retaliate against employee who request or wear a respirator.
30 seconds.
Okay, ventilation. Employers have to review this ventilation guide from CDPH. You can just Google ventilation CDPH and you can see this guide. It just tells you how you can improve ventilation to prevent COVID transmission in the workplace. And then employers should ventilate their workplace, to minimize transmission. Since this is an airborne disease, ventilation is one of the good ways to prevent transmission. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Berg. That's Mr. Berg from Cal OSHA. We're going to be hearing more from Mr. Berg here in just a few moments. We want to remind you, if you'd like to be able to ask a question tonight, simply drop your question into the chat right now. We're going to be getting to as many questions as possible. Cindy's also going to be taking live questions here in just a few moments. But before we get into questions, we want to talk about the vaccine mandate, what is and isn't possible. And one of the best experts on this is Brandon Butler. We're grateful that he is here today. He's from the Department of Fair Employment and Housing on behalf of the state of California. Mr. Butler is going to be giving a 5-minute presentation that we're going to be getting to your questions. Mr. Butler, good afternoon. Welcome, sir. We welcome you to Del Norte County. The floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you, Senator. Thank you, Cal Chamber, and thank you to the folks in Del Norte County, one of our most beautiful counties in California. So let me go ahead and share my screen and get us started and take us through what we need to know about vaccinations and employment. So here we go. So here we go. Excellent. So you should be able to see my screen here. Let me just get right into it, which is, okay, may an employer require its employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19? And the short answer is yes. An employer under our Fair Employment and Housing Act in California may require its employees to receive an FDA-approved vaccination against COVID-19 infection, so long as the employer does not discriminate against or harass employees on the basis of one of their protected characteristics like race or religion or gender. And we also accommodate folks who have a sincerely held religious belief, as well as persons with disabilities. So that's the caveat. Yes, we can require vaccination subject to reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities, as well as those with sincerely held religious beliefs or practices. And we cannot retaliate against anyone for requesting an accommodation or asking for it as an employer. The kind of next kind of question is, just kind of reinforcing the idea that, again, yes, you can have a mandate that all your employees get a COVID-19 vaccination. But remember, if folks have a disability, then we may have to provide a reasonable accommodation where we engage in an interactive process to figure out
All right, we think we may, Mr. Butler, it would not be a Zoom meeting without having one person freeze or not taking themselves off of mute. So we will be getting back to Mr. Butler.
Requests. Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Butler, you just froze like the last 30 seconds. I am so
sorry. Really?
Sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
So I'm just going to be a rewind for about 30 seconds and we'll please go right ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
Sorry. I don't know what happened here. Okay, well, let me just take it back. I'll keep it quick. Short answer, yes, vaccinations for employees, and an employer can mandate that. Okay, that can be required, subject to reasonable accommodation for persons with disabilities and/or those with sincerely held religious beliefs. Okay, that's the rule. Now, there are, as employers know, there's a process of reasonable accommodation. So an employee may ask for an accommodation, and you'll have to engage in the interactive process to determine whether you can accommodate them or whether it presents an undue financial hardship or perhaps would endanger the health and safety of others in the workplace. So these are case by case. It's hard to put a general rule of how can we accommodate an employee with a disability or religious belief who cannot take a vaccination. But we have a test, just like we do have in all employment law. So, we have to go through that. We have to be listening to accommodations for disability. But again, if it's an undue hardship for the employer or it's going to present a health and safety danger to those in the workplace, the accommodation may be denied. And again, where an accommodation exists is very fact specific and depends on the nature of the case. And similarly, let me just also quickly address the issue of, we've been hearing about this, what about those who are saying they cannot take a vaccination, they cannot comply with the employer mandate because of a sincerely held religious belief? And the answer is that the employer may mandate a vaccination requirement, but may need to provide a religious accommodation for someone who's asking for that due to their religious beliefs or practices. And we'll have to engage in that interactive process to determine whether we can accommodate that, or whether that also presents an undue hardship for the employer, or is going to subject folks to health and safety concerns. Now, with regard to religious accommodation, generally, unless specifically requested by the employee should not be segregated based on their religion, unless that's requested. And again, folks may ask for this. We need to go through the process and the interactive process of trying to provide that. But where it presents an undue hardship, there's no way to do it. The employer needs someone to open that store. There's no way to accommodate this. Then there may be, it may not be able to be provided as an accommodation. So those are like the two big issues. Yes, vaccination requirement. You can require that everyone have a vaccination, subject to accommodation for persons with disabilities and sincerely held religious beliefs. And let me also just say too,
you got about 30 seconds, Mr. Butler.
Okay, and lastly, let me just say, if someone says, I don't trust the vaccine, I don't believe it's safe, I don't want to take it, those are not a disability or a religious reason. And those could be denied and would be subject to progressive discipline by the employer. If it's just, I don't trust it, I don't think it's safe. So with that, I will close and looking forward to taking your questions.
Thank you so much. That's Brandon Butler. Really grateful that you were here tonight. And by the way, Mr. Butler, Mr. Berg is going to be sticking around to be able to take your questions live here tonight. I want to say thank you again to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting us. Please pass on our thanks, Ms. Vosberg, to your board. And of course, we have Dr. Stutz here, the Public Health Officer for the County of Del Norte, also prepared to take questions. There's 3 ways to be able to ask questions. First and foremost, we have pre-submitted questions. If you have questions right now, please drop your question into the chat. We're going to get right to them, or Cindy will be taking live questions in just a few moments. So let's get right into it. We're going to go first to a question that came in regards to vaccinations in staff. Mr. Butler, you are up on this first question. Quote, some of my staff of 12 are vaccinated, some aren't. Am I able to ask them who is vaccinated and who isn't? Second question is, can I mandate the unvaccinated staff wear N95s that the chamber has given us? Mr. Butler, 2 questions. What say you?
The answer is yes. You can ask people if they've had the vaccination, and if they have not, an employer could, outright, demand that everyone have a vaccination. But if you want to provide a mask, and absolutely you can do that, subject to reasonable accommodation or maybe religious accommodation. If like someone has a disability and may not be able to wear that particular type of mask, we may have to provide another accommodation. But the answer is broadly yes.
Thank you so much, Brandon Butler. Our next question is going to be going to Dr. Stutz. Dr. Stutz is the Public Health Officer for the County of Del Norte. This question is coming in. Thank you so much to Esperanza. Esperanza asks, Dr. Stutz, when the masking mandate is lifted, would we fall back on the mandate of masks to be worn by unvaccinated versus vaccinated? So, Dr. Stutz, let's just say in the next 2 to 4 weeks, you make the decision to be able to relax the mask mandate. Who still needs to wear those masks? Is it those who are unvaccinated in indoor settings? Dr. Stutz, if you could please set us straight.
It'll fall back to whatever the state guidelines are. There are specific situations that require masking, such as if you're an employee in a school setting or if you're a student at school. So it will just fall back to the CDPH and or Cal OSHA guidelines, depending on if they come out with their own mandates.
That's great. So Mr. Berg, let's just jump to you, and then we're going to go to Cindy Vosberg for some live questions. Mr. Berg, so once the county relaxes their mask mandate, if you are unvaccinated per state law, do you still have to wear a mask indoors, Mr. Berg?
Yeah, it's correct. Unvaccinated people have to wear masks indoors.
So that is either in their workplace or even going to the grocery store?
This just applies to employees. So we require employees to wear masks indoors. And like in a grocery store for the general public, the employer has to like post or somehow inform people they have to wear masks. It doesn't have to enforce those. If someone, a customer refuses to do it, employer's not required to try to enforce that, just to inform them and that's it.
All right, so employer can mandate unvaccinated folks to wear their mask in the workplace. If it's a grocery store, it's ultimately up to that store owner if they choose to have customers wear masks or not. Is that correct?
Yeah, they just have to inform what their policies are to the customers, and they can make their own decision on whether they want to enforce that or not.
All right, that's Eric Berg from Cal OSHA. We're now going to be going to live comments and questions from Cindy Vosberg. We're going to ask folks to be able to use the raise the hand function right now. If you could please use the raise the hand function. And Ms. Vosberg, the floor is yours to be able to call on folks for live comments and questions.
Thank you, Senator McGuire. Would anybody like to ask a live question? Just raise your hand and we will unmute you. I see that we have quite a few of the questions are in the chat box and we will get to those. But if somebody would like to ask a live question, just raise your hand. Okay, so we have Mary Dorman. And if Mary, hold on one second. Mary Dorman is one of our State Farm insurance agents. She owns an agency here in town. So Mary, go ahead.
Hi, so my question has to do with some of the paperwork we were being required to do earlier. And that is with employees when they come in the morning. We were told we either needed to do the temperature test or have them sign a form attesting to the fact that they were not sick and they had no COVID symptoms. Are we still required to do that? And are we required to do it even if they're vaccinated?
So Eric, would you like to take that?
Sure. The state regulation does require the employer have a system for employees, checking employees' symptoms or temperature. And they can ask employees to do that themselves at home before they come to work if they like. There's not a requirement to do record keeping for that. So as long as they have a policy and they inform employees and make sure employees are doing that, they don't have to keep records.
Great, thank you. Mary, does that answer your question? I think Mary is gone. Okay, great. So we're going to take one more question live. And Kevin Hawkins, I see that you have your hand raised. And so Kevin, Eric Weir is going to go ahead and unmute you.
Okay.
And Kevin is our Alder Point real estate owner. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so quick question for me and just more of a practical question. We want to provide as business owners the ability to have rapid testing for our employees. But what we have found is that it's very difficult to obtain those. I was wondering if there is a plan in place for a resource to be available to business owners to obtain these tests outside of having to go out to your local grocery store and try to find them.
And so I think, Dr. Stetz, could you handle that for us on the local scene?
Yeah, so some industries will be able to obtain some state or local support with supplies. For example, healthcare and clinics and hospitals and EMS agencies, fire departments and things like that will may be able to obtain some supplies from through our MOOC system by submitting a request to public health. For other private businesses, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult. I don't know if Melody has anything to say about that.
Brandon or Eric, did you want to chime in?
I mean, the state does have some testing capabilities through the California Department of Public Health. That's why I suggest contacting them and the County Department of Public Health.
Okay, great. And so, Kevin, you had asked me a question that may have made it in on the submitted questions, but I'm going to go ahead and say it for you here. You were wondering the other day where you should send your employees to be tested for those that wanted to get a test.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, am I on? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So my question is, if we're requiring these non-vaccinated employees to have these tests completed, but there's no resources to either to get tests, are we sending them somewhere? What's the methodology here? I'm just trying on a practical level, logistically, we're trying to figure out where do we send these people?
Melody or Dr. Stutz, Melody, would you like to answer that? Some of our testing sites?
Absolutely. So we've been fortunate enough to be working with OptumServe Testing. They've been with us for several months now, and they are available here in Crescent City 4 days a week, and also in outlying areas in Smith River and in Klamath. And currently as well, we also have a strike team that is located over at the hospital where you can receive testing there as well. Those are PCR tests that are going to have to be sent out, and the results would come back and be reported. It's my understanding that rapid testing is available through local healthcare providers. And so individuals could check up with their healthcare provider, but we're hoping that those tests are saved for individuals who might be positive. So Dr. Stutz, do you have anything further to say about that?
Only that I see where Kevin's going with this question. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for some employers to meet those requirements if they're required to test their unvaccinated workers. There's been a lot of chatter about this amongst the health officers and with CDPH. And I think there are probably some options on the horizon, including the development of a lot cheaper, faster, rapid tests, which will probably be sufficient to meet those guidelines, but it's going to be difficult for a lot of businesses to meet this requirement. I'll give you that.
Okay, great. So Kevin, just for your information, I just found out tonight that the testing site that's been over by Kidstown is going to be moving over to below the chamber office at the cultural center at the drive-through. They get people through there in just minutes. And so people will be able to drive right through and be tested. And so staff of the chamber, that's going to be effective starting tomorrow or next week, I think it is. I believe effective October 1st, but I don't think they do Friday testing. And so just FYI to all of you, thank you very much. And then Senator McGuire, let's go ahead and send it back over to you. And then we'll come back to the live questions after you take some of the chat and the pre-submitted.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Vosberg. All right, we're taking your questions, those who have been submitting questions in the chat or pre-submitted questions via email prior to tonight's event. So let's go to Tracy. Tracy asks, it's my understanding that childcare facilities must also wear masks. Mr. Berg, your understanding on childcare facilities and masking?
Yeah, the California Department of Public Health does require mask use in childcare and K through 12 education. And our regulation, of course, applies just to employees, but I think theirs applies to children, I believe, over 2 years old. But yeah, it does require that in the Department of Public Health guidelines.
So those childcare facilities, if you have a child that's over the age of 2, there is masking guidelines mandated. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's available from the California Department of Public Health.
All right.
I can post that in the chat if you like.
That'd be great. Mr. Berg, thank you so much. We're going to go to our next question. This is coming in from Esperanza. Good evening, Esperanza. She asked, can proof of vaccination be required from members of the public when visiting a business or agency like a courthouse, or is it pretty much a self-attesting situation? Let's go to Mr. Butler. Mr. Butler, let's talk about that. This can be sticky for business owners. Can proof of vaccination be required from members of the public when visiting a business or agency like a courthouse, or is it pretty much a self-attesting situation? Mr. Butler.
Well, I would say this is a real fluid situation, and there's a lot of local mandates that are happening where there is a requirement for certain types of businesses. So, I would say we really need to look to our local authority of what's being required. But if a business, was going to require that folks come in with a proof of vaccination, again, there would be that caveat of needing to accommodate persons with disabilities. There may be some folks who may not be able to, and we might need to still provide a service to them, similar to someone who uses a wheelchair, who uses a gas station. The attendant comes out and fills up their pump since they're not able to do it themselves. So, that's what I would say. But I'd also say let's look to our local guidance on what is being required, because it may be covered there, but there is that opening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Butler. Very grateful. Mr. Butler is with the State Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Dr. Stutz, do you want to chime in on this issue?
Yeah, also been a lot of discussion about this amongst the health officers, and this is also, as you mentioned, a fluid situation and evolving. There may be some more guidance coming out from CDPH on the issue, specifically in the next couple of weeks, because this has been brought up amongst the health officers, and there's a lot of concern over it.
So, Dr. Stutz, Mr. Butler, would it be fair to say, to be continued, more information coming here probably within the next potentially 10 days?
I would say that that's fair, and I know we are working on some additional guidance on this, very fluid issue as well. So stay tuned. But yes, there should be more guidance coming on this point.
Thank you so much, Mr. Butler. Thank you, Dr. Stutz. All right, let's go to our next question. This is for, I believe, Mr. Berg. Mr. Berg, this is a pre-submitted question prior to tonight's event. If I tell my employees to either get vaccinated or get weekly tests, who has to pay for the test? My employees, or does the business have to cover the tests? Mr. Berg.
Yeah, if testing is required through regulation or by the employer, then the employer has to pay for it. And there's a lot of free testing sites available as well. I posted where you can find testing sites in the chat. So they might want to avail themselves of some free testing sites.
Thank you so much. Very grateful, Mr. Berg. All right, this is going to be our last question for now. Then I'm going to turn it back over to our chamber executive who does such fantastic work. But let's go to Christine's question. I'm wondering how these guidelines apply to volunteers. How do these guidelines apply to volunteers? Let's talk all issues of vaccinations and go to Mr. Butler.
Yeah, so all these guidelines around vaccinations would apply to volunteers who are, interns or who are working at, an employment office. It would all apply. There would be no distinction in terms of that, the framework of the law.
Thank you so much, Mr. Butler. Cindy, a lot of questions coming in, trying to get to as many answers as possible. This is what tonight's forum is all about. Let's go to some additional live questions. Ms. Vosberg, take it away. You're on mute, Ms. Vosberg.
So we have nobody right now with their hands up. Did anybody want to ask a live question? If so, raise your hand. And Christine, I see that you got your question answered and took your hand down. Thank you very much. By the way, Senator, Christine is our CASA, our local CASA of Del Norte director, and does a fabulous job. And Christine has her hand up again and has another question. And you are now unmuted, Christine.
Yeah, I do have another question about if staff expose themselves, like going to family events, and I require them to quarantine or test prior to coming back, I'm responsible for providing a test to them.
So Brandy, did you want to take that? Or is that actually an Eric Berg?
Maybe throw it to Eric if you want to follow up on your requirements for testing in an employer program.
So did you hear her question, Eric?
Yeah, I'm just trying to look it up real quick. Yeah, it applies close contact at the workplace. I mean, they have to provide testing. So the employer would have to ensure that they test negative, but they don't have to pay for the test if it happened outside the workplace.
Did you hear that, Christine? Do you have that? So if it
I did.
happens outside the workplace, the employee would probably go to a free testing site. If you're requiring it because they were exposed in the workplace, then you need to provide the test if it's not a free testing site.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator, I'm going to talk. Actually, we have one more from Kevin Hawkins. Let's do that question. And Kevin, Eric will unmute you. There
Just
he
an odd
goes.
question. Just an odd question, but we had somebody not in my company, but another friend's company that experienced this recently, where they had an employee test positive, and then within 5 days returned to the hospital and had a negative test, but they were still within obviously within that 10-day period, and the employer didn't know whether or not they should allow this employee to come back. They had a negative test, but they were still within the required 10-day period from initial symptoms.
Yeah, I can answer that, I think. So CDPH updated their guidelines. And so if someone tests negative on day 5 or later after being exposed, then they can come back after day 7 instead of after day 10.
Okay.
As long as they're asymptomatic, right?
Yeah, no
As long as-
symptoms.
Yeah,
correct.
no symptoms and a negative test.
Yeah, negative test after day 5 or later, and then come back on day 8.
Copy.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. So Senator McGuire, I'm going to send it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Vosberg. Hey, you have those questions. We're trying to get you those answers tonight. Let's keep it going. We're going to go into a bit of a lightning round. We have about 10 minutes left. We encourage you, if you'd like to be able to ask a live question here tonight, simply raise the hand, use the raise the hand feature, and Ms. Vosberg will be calling on you in just a few moments. Let's go to our next question that comes in from Stephanie. Really great question. What about staff or volunteers who say that they have had COVID already and are now immune, so they're not going to get the vaccine? Do they still need to wear a mask indoors or to be treated same as vaccinated people with no mask? All right, so you got an individual who's had COVID. They then have those antibodies. Do they still need to wear a mask indoors, or should they be treated like a vaccinated resident? Mr. Berg or Mr. Butler, who would like to take this?
They still have to wear a mask indoors.
Still have to wear a mask indoors?
Yes.
That is a very simple question, Mr. Berg. There we go. Thank you so much. Stephanie, thank you for your question. I have to say these next are you can tell where businesses are concerned. Let's talk about time off for employees. The question is, and I think this is going to go to Mr. Berg, do I have to give all my staff paid time off if another employee comes down with COVID? Mr. Berg.
Time off is required, paid time off is required for employees who have close contact at work. So that means being within 6 feet of a case for a cumulative total of 15 minutes in a 24-hour period. So if that happens in the workplace, then yeah, paid time off is required. So
is there different length of time for time off in regards to if you have a direct exposure, no mask, or if you have someone that was close to you with a mask? Talk to us about how that works.
Well, the time to be in quarantine is the same basically, whether you're wearing a mask or not. It's 10 days, or if you get a test on day 5, you can return after day 7. So that's after a close contact.
That's great.
So that doesn't matter. And there is one exception for employers that are wearing or employees that are wearing a respirator and have been fit tested with a respirator. If they have close contact, then they don't have to be quarantined. And this only applies to unvaccinated people. Vaccinated people do not need to be quarantined under the state rule right now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Berg. I think we're going to stick with Mr. Berg. Really important subject, and that is time off. This next question is, how much paid time does an employee get if they're not feeling well, gets COVID tested, but the results take over a week to come back, so they don't come back to work until the test results come in and the test is negative? We only have 13 employees, and losing half my staff almost shuts down my business. So there's been a backlog on test results. Mr. Berg, what happens in that situation?
But under the COVID prevention regulation, employees only have to be excluded from the workplace under two circumstances. Yeah, once they test positive, then they have to be excluded for at least 10 days and their symptoms have to improve and there's no fever. So just them having symptoms, it does not automatically kick in that they have to be paid outside of the workplace, a paid time off.
That's Eric Berg, Cal OSHA. Thank you so much, Mr. Berg. One more, and we're going to then turn it back over to Ms. Vosberg. We're going to encourage folks, if you'd like to be able to ask a live question, and thank you again for being with us tonight. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting this critical forum. If you'd like to ask a live question, if you could please use the hand, raise the hand feature now. Simply click that hand raise and that yellow hand will pop right up. Cindy's going to call on you in just a moment. Let's go to our next question in the chat. We're going to say good evening to Al. Al, I hope that you're doing well. Al asks, can a business require all patrons to be vaccinated? And how would they verify that? Mr. Butler, we're coming to you, sir. Can a business require all patrons to be vaccinated? And how would they verify that, Mr. Butler?
Well, it's a great question. You're seeing this happen, around the state where, patrons are, going to concerts or going to things, are having to show proof of vaccination, either through, the state's, barcode registration system or, providing a picture of it. I think this is still a very fluid area of what is exactly going to be the way, but generally, this is like a public accommodation issue. And, yes, you're seeing it in terms of how you verify it. We're seeing either, folks are seeing the proof of the card or they're accessing the state's barcode website system where you can verify it if it's been uploaded there. So that's what I could give you, but I know this is a very fluid issue that's continuing to get more guidance. So I would also say stay tuned for more on this.
All right, that's Mr. Butler. Mr. Butler is with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. He's with us tonight, along with Mr. Berg from Cal OSHA, taking your questions. Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you for live questions. The floor is yours.
So we're going to go to Mary Dorman first, and after that will be Christine with CASA again. Mary, go ahead.
So a clarification on the paid time off issue. Again, you had mentioned it's required that they get paid time off if the exposure happened at work. If the exposure happened while they're not at work and they test positive and they're at home, is there additional mandated paid time off beyond their regular sick leave that I would normally be providing?
No, it'd be just their regular sick leave.
So if they use it up in a week and they're still at home sick for another 2 weeks, that's on them?
Yeah, the paid time off under the COVID prevention regulations only applies to exposures that happen at work.
Okay,
So
thank you for
it's
clarifying.
separate. Yeah, it's separate from other sick leave requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was a great question. And Christine? We have another question from Christine with CASA. Christine, there you go. We can hear you now.
I didn't know I had to do that myself. My question's more about liability. So, my responsibility is to protect our program. And one of my questions is there a liability? I am concerned about implementing policies and procedures to demand that all of my staff and my volunteers get vaccinated, because I'm concerned that there's going to be, some type of lawsuit against our program with HR, or if someone were to, I guess my question is, under these OSHA guidelines, is there any liability or risks against the program if they don't implement it, like some of these guidelines?
Eric, I think this goes back to you.
I mean, we don't mandate vaccines. It's been in the news that OSHA will mandate vaccines for large employers. And then when that happens, then the state will adopt those, but that hasn't happened yet. So we don't require vaccines right now. But if an employer does require vaccines, there's no prohibition against that. They're free to do that. I think Brandon is the expert on that, though.
Right. I mean, an employer is free to enact a vaccine, mandate if that's what they would like to do. And so, we can do that, now and require, and you're seeing that across, the country that folks are being required. So that's, it's not a mandate. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, you can. And there are rules if you do it, like I said, subject to accommodation and religious accommodation, which do become one of the areas of liability, right? Of discrimination. If someone says, hey, I was discriminated against because I didn't get an accommodation or my religious belief. So there's, an issue of liability there, at least, that, our office, works in. But, so I could say that.
Thank you, Brandon. Great. And Senator McGuire, we're going to send this back your way.
Thank you so much, Cindy. We are in the home stretch. We have a few more minutes, and we are going to invite you to stay tuned at 6 o'clock. There will be the community COVID briefing with the county, the city, along with Sutter Coast. So we're going to need to be able to adjourn in just a few moments, but let's try to squeeze in 2 more questions, Cindy, then we're going to turn it back to you for closing comments. This one is coming in for, I believe it's going to be from Mr. Berg. The question is, how much paid time off do I have to give my employees if their family member has been exposed to COVID? What if their family member has COVID? Let's talk about that time off, Mr. Berg.
Yeah, that would not, since it's not work related, the employer would not have to provide paid time off. I mean, they'd have to be kept out of the workplace, but the employer doesn't have to provide paid time off under the COVID prevention regulations.
And I'll just add to this point that under the California Family Rights Act, it's not paid leave, but you may be, the employee may be able to get unpaid job protected leave to care for that family member if they have a serious health condition. So it's not paid. Employers don't have to pay, but they couldn't lose their job if they had to take time off to care for someone who had a serious health condition for which COVID can be.
Really, thank you so much for chiming in on that. That's really important, Mr. Butler. Appreciate that. We're going to go to our last pre-submitted question of the evening, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Vosberg. I believe this is going to be for you, Mr. Butler. Mr. Butler, question is, what if my staff is fearful of getting COVID and they don't want to work in the office and they insist on working remotely, but I find that they're not productive working remotely? What do I do?
Well, it's a great question, and I would just say again that unless the employee has a religious accommodation request or a disability request that is requiring them to work from home, there's no requirement that the employer provide remote working. So that's going to be something that you're dealing with internally, and if folks aren't being productive, you can do what you do with your employer policy. But where folks are saying I need to work from home due to a disability related situation or religious accommodation, we would treat that differently. But just the fear of it and all of that, if it's not a disability or religious issue, then that's not going to be a reason to provide an accommodation. Those only apply to a disability or workplace thing.
That's Brandon Butler. Mr. Butler is with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Thank you so much, Mr. Butler, for being with us tonight. And we also want to say thank you to Eric Berg. Eric Berg, representing Cal OSHA. Eric, thank you so much for joining us here on the North Coast. We're grateful to both of you, of course, to Dr. Stutz, Melody Cannon-Cuts, and we have a great team behind the scenes. We want to say thank you so much to Eric Weir, the city manager from Crescent City. He has been so solid through thick and thin during this public health crisis. Mr. Weir, thank you, along with Sonny Valero. We couldn't do it without you. And finally, just want to say thank you so much to Cindy Vosberg and the Chamber of Commerce. Cindy, thank you. You're constantly standing strong for Del Norte. You are the best liaison, the best spokesperson for our region. We are so grateful for your work, your dedication to this community. I'm going to turn it over to you for closing comments. And thank you again to the Chamber for hosting us here today.
Thank you, Senator. And we want to thank you very much for being here tonight with us. We appreciate when you turn your direction here and make us all feel the love and that you care about us. That's so important. And we know that you represent us very diligently there in Sacramento. So thank you for that. I also want to thank all of our panelists, and I especially want to thank all of the attendees. At one point, we had over 35 businesses here in the room, and that's so important here in Del Norte County anything that we can do. If you have further questions, I know it's really tough navigating all of these ins and outs of it. And so I really appreciate Brandon and Eric being here, and Willie, who was a wonderful resource, and of course, Melody. So we have the other meeting that starts in just 5 minutes. Sunny, I believe, has posted or pasted a couple times in the chat room the link to get to the other meeting. There we'll have Sutter Coast Hospital, we'll have Dr. Stutz, and we'll have Jeff Harris, the school superintendent, giving us an update. We have some great numbers to report tonight and some good news. So I hope to see you guys on the other side. And thank you all so very much. And if you want for us to pull this team together again in a few weeks, you know my email, let me know, and we're happy to do this again for you as the situation keeps changing. Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, so Sarah is looking for the link. Sunny. So Sarah, can you scroll up? And she is, let's see if I can help her out. Thank you, Senator.